We have a few we chose for this month, and then Allison's going to lead us after this into a little time of personal sharing. So I can't read that from here, so I'm going to turn around with you. Okay, just go ahead and listen along. Sit silent. Close your eyes if you want, and just let the scripture speak to you. So Exodus 16:4, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are going to go out each day and gather enough for that day. Philippians 4:19, and my God will supply every need of yours according to his riches and glory in Christ Jesus. And lastly, 2 Corinthians 12:9, Jesus says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weakness, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. You may have a seat. And so now I'm going to pass it over to Allison, and she's going to share just what's been going on in her heart and with the Lord.
Thank you. Good morning. I wanted to share about over the fall, the season we just closed. I walked through a season that stretched me in ways that I didn't expect. And there were moments when I am sure that I would have fallen apart if it weren't for the Lord and his faithfulness in providing exactly what I needed when I needed it. Most of the time, that provision didn't look like deliverance from the hard circumstances. It looked like steady support. I had enough strength, enough peace, and enough hope for that day. It kept bringing me back to the story of manna in the Bible. When God provided manna to the Israelites in the wilderness, he did not give them a lifetime supply. He gave them their daily bread. If they tried to store it up, it spoiled. I used to find that really frustrating because why couldn't he give them everything? He brought them to this specific point. Why could he have not just given them all that they needed right away? But he was faithful and he had a plan. I realized that I was living in my own manna season. Each day, God gave me exactly what I needed when I needed it. I wanted certainty, but God was teaching me trust. I wanted control, but God was offering me dependence on him. One week in particular that made this really real was our main vehicle, the only way that our whole family can leave the house at once, was in the shop. A windstorm had knocked out our power, and then my son became very sick with a high fever. Very fast. Just one morning he was sprinting, and the next minute he's laying on the couch almost at 105 degrees, shaking. I remember standing in a dimly lit dining room and praying, almost in the dark, and I felt the Lord holding me. I wasn't shaken because he wasn't shaken, and I was holding my sick child, and he was holding his anxious child. Seasons like this teach me that God's provision doesn't always look like abundance in advance, but it does look like faithfulness. One day at a time, and just like manna in the wilderness, what God gives us today is enough because he's enough. My prayer for all of you in this room is that if you are in a season of struggle and uncertainty, that you would let the Lord hold you and give you what you need. And if you never have put your faith and trust in him, that you would take this time to do so because he is trustworthy and he won't disappoint you. And it's an incredible thing once you look at the faithfulness that he's provided for you in the ways that he has. And when you start to look for them, they're there. They're always going to be there because he's constantly working. As Kaylee shared in Exodus 16:4, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough just for that day. So I pray that the Lord will give you your daily bread and exactly what you need every day. It's been really cool to read all of that. Write all of that and just see it all come together. The Lord's so faithful.
Thanks for sharing, Allison.
Yeah, thanks. That's awesome.
So relatable. So relatable. I feel like led to share something too, like personal, not too personal, but with that, I just remember we had like a financial need. We moved houses, and I was like, I'll share a specific. It was, we moved houses, and it'd be an $800 difference. And I'm like, we don't even have $100 difference. Like, where's the 800 going to come from? And my husband that same week got an exact raise of $800 a month. And I'm like, God, why not like 1,000 or 2,000? 800. But how specific the Lord meets us in that need that we have for that moment. And so good. Thanks for sharing.
I'll just share really fast. As I told Allison, she's like, hey, how are you doing? I'm like, here's how I'm actually doing. And she's like, well, I'm going to actually send you this because I think it's applicable. And it was just really encouraging too. So thank you, Allison.
Yes. Okay, we are going to jump into our table check-in. We've really enjoyed the rhythm in the mornings of starting out with you guys being able to gather, and there's some questions for you, and we just hope that you can really get connected, and you have smaller tables. If you have like 3 or less, you could join tables with somebody else. You're totally fine to stay put, but it's up to you. So yeah, we just hope you guys have a rich time, and we'll see you in about 15 minutes.
All right, I hate to cut your time short. You guys are all looking in good conversation. I get the privilege of introducing this month's speaker. Her name's Kathy Lindley. Kathy enjoyed many years of teaching as a licensed professional before embarking on a journey of homeschool, at which time she discovered learning differences in her own kids. When her family moved to Papua New Guinea to serve with Wycliffe Bible translators in 2012, Kathy began studying and serving as a learning specialist for kids with learning differences. Her family returned to the United States in 2021, and she now serves as the manager of learning engagement with Wycliffe USA, leading the new staff orientation program. Kathy has 2 children, ages 23 and 24. Parenting was by far the most rewarding and most difficult thing she has ever done. Her husband of 29 years, Todd, is the Connect Ministry Director for Good Shepherd Community Church. Kathy is passionate about God's Word and wants to see everyone not only have access to it, but also be transformed by it through their relationship with God. Please help me welcome Kathy Lindley.
I am so excited to get to be here with you today and to share the gift of time, both with God and as something that we can give to our children. So she gave a great introduction of my family. You probably do recognize my husband as the person who's always out behind the information desk out there. I have been with Wycliffe, serving with Wycliffe now for 17 years. When we first went overseas, our kids were 8 and 10. So even though I raised them the large majority of their life internationally, they were here when they were little, and they were a part of Mom to Mom, and it was a huge blessing in my life, so I'm so excited to get to be here with you. This is what my family really looks like. We were taking those pictures at the Christmas Eve service, and they realized that the photo was going again, and everyone was like, oh, it's going to take another one. And so this is what they did. So this is who we really are. And then this is what they looked like when we came to Good Shepherd, and they were 2 and 3 years old. They're 18 months apart. And now, 20 years later from this picture, because they're 23 and 24, I can tell you it really has been a blessing to raise my kids. And it definitely is the hardest thing I've ever done. But it is something that really deserves our attention and our focus and our energy. And it's a beautiful thing that I'm so glad that God gave me the opportunity to do. So I want to ask you this question. If you were to hear a mom say, it's okay, go play, I'm watching you, what would you think the mom is saying by that phrase, I'm watching you? What is she saying? And I'm actually going to give you just a tiny 30 seconds to kind of talk at your table. What is the mom saying when she says, I'm watching you? Okay, so did we get a few examples? I want to hear a few. Do I have any bold people who will just shout out to me something you heard at your table? What is something that the mom is saying? You're safe. What else? You have our attention. What else? I'm sorry, what was that one? I'll take care of you. Yeah, the child is being told that they're safe, that the boundaries are for their benefit, that the mom cares about them, that the mom's invested in them. So now I want to ask you this question. How do you feel when someone says to you, God is watching you? Okay, I'm going to pull you guys back up here. I want to tell you a little bit about my experience from the stage. When I asked you the first question, I immediately heard laughter and instant conversation. When I asked you the second one, you guys were quiet. It was like, I don't know, God's watching me right now. You know, do I say the right thing? How is this different? Is the first thing that comes to your mind that he loves you, that he's for you, that he's with you, that you're safe? Or does this sometimes conjure up this idea that you need to perform? That God is watching you, and if you do it wrong, oh, he's going to notice. I mean, I grew up in a world where I did get this. You better behave. God is watching you. But if mommy's watching you, it's a very different paradigm, right? So A.W. Tozer had a famous quote. He said, "What comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us." And the reason he said this is because what you think about God influences who you become, and who you become impacts the way that you parent your kids. So if you believe that God is out to get you, that he's constantly watching to see if you do something wrong, that he's demanding that you perform so that you can show that you love him, then you're going to have a tendency to parent your kids that way as well. And you're going to pass on that theology to your kids even if you don't want to. But mom is watching you means I love you and you're safe. And God is watching you also means I love you and you're safe. And I want you to get an idea today about how we can give love to our kids, but how that love comes entirely from our understanding of who God is. And Greg had a wonderful sermon. It was the week before Christmas. So if you were here, you know what I'm talking about. If you weren't, or you don't attend Good Shepherd, go listen to his sermon about the way that God loves us. It is so on point. And he has a definition, and he says, someone who loves you is someone who will give of their time and resources to pursue what's best for you. And that is the way that we respond to our children, but that is also the way that God responds to us. And if you've grown up in a place where you've been told you have to perform for God to love you, or you have to be good enough, that's actually not the message of the Bible. And I want to help us get to a place where we can understand that this morning. So that's where we're going. When I was a new mom, I was so excited to take my baby out into a social environment and show him off. And every person that I introduced him to said something to me like, "Oh, it goes by so fast. Oh, just try to enjoy him. Oh, take time and slow down. These are such precious moments." And being an overachiever, I felt this burden that somehow I was supposed to do correctly what evidently the entire rest of the world had done wrong. I mean, if everybody has the same advice, nobody succeeded. Not one person said to me, "Oh, I absolutely treasured my child and I did it right and you should be like me." Nobody told me that. And I started thinking, maybe this isn't God's design, that we just can slow down as moms. And I shared this with my dad, and he said, "Yeah, people told me that the years fly by, but someone also told me that the days drag on forever." And I thought that I can resonate with. It does feel like the years fly by when you look back, but in the moment, in the day by day, feels like it just is dragging on. And I think this is actually part of God's design for us as moms. Because the idea that you can slow down and just enjoy your child is a gift that I think grandparents get. Because they can enjoy that kid, be present, they're right there, and then they can hand that baby back and go get a good night's sleep, right? So when you read in Proverbs 31 that it says her lamp does not go out at night, I am completely convinced that is infancy. That is a newborn that will not sleep through the night. That's why she's up. She can't do that her whole life. She'd end up in an insane asylum. God's designed us to need sleep. But I think in that little window of time where you have to give, and that baby just takes, that God is actually laying a foundation for us to understand what parenting is. Because it's about sacrifice. It's about recognizing that there's a vulnerable human being that is depending on you. It's about realizing that you're more selfish than you thought you were. You're not as patient as you thought you were. And that you're going to have lots of character building opportunities ahead of you during the preschool years. And we need to embrace those, but I don't know that we can slow down and enjoy them the way that the rest of the world asks us to, because it's exhausting. It's just really overwhelming and it's really exhausting. So the first thing I want to do is just tell you that's okay. It's okay to be exhausted. It's okay to get to the end of your day and feel like, oh, I didn't accomplish what I thought I should do today, or I can't measure any success. But remember that the way that you're loving your child is based on the identity of them as your child. It's not based on what you got done that day or what they got done that day. And their pace is really, really slow. And I absolutely believe that that's God's design. You will never have more time with your kids than you do in the preschool years, as far as ability to impact them. Because when a child is in those early years, especially in the birth to 3 years, their entire world is whatever's right in front of them. They don't have goals, they don't have dreams, they're not thinking about their interests and ideas, they're not thinking about the friends they want to get together with. They're thinking about what's right here. And when they're a tiny baby, they're literally thinking about what's right here. And if you don't come into that space, you don't have the chance to impact them the way that God's designed for you to impact them. And it's hard and it's exhausting, but it's totally worth it because you are laying the foundation for how they will interact with the rest of the world in that little tiny window of time. And it's totally worth it. So God asks us to start with that sacrifice, and the years will fly by. But sometimes the days will drag on forever. So like I said, I was an overachiever. I wanted to parent well. And when we first moved up here, my husband was working for Christian Supply. It was a big bookstore on Division Street. I had access to every book you could possibly imagine about parenting. And I read them all because I was trying to figure out how to do this parenting thing right. But it didn't work. And it was so frustrating to me because the book said, if you're consistent and you do what you're supposed to do, then your children will stop fighting with you and they will be amazing and you'll have first-time obedience and kids do everything without arguing or complaining. Oh, I wanted to get there. And I tried so hard. And one time in desperation, I thought, I think that I'm consistent. I think that I'm doing what the books say, but maybe I'm just completely blind to this. I don't know. So my children are in total meltdown. I look at my son, who was about 4 at the time, and I said, does this work for you? Do you, when you pitch a fit because you don't like what I say, do I give into it? Because I thought I was consistent. I'm a strong personality. And my son looks at me and he says, no, when you say no, you mean it. That's why we cry. And they're just both crying, just melting down. So years later, I had a chance to speak with a counselor. And I said, can you explain this to me? Like, why did my kids do this? And he says, well, your kids are having an atypical response. And I said, well, what does that mean? And he says, well, it means that the books won't work for you. And I said, well, how many people have kids with an atypical response? And he goes, about 50%. I said, you're telling me that for every Christian bestseller out there about how to have a new kid by Friday, 1 out of 2 people is going to read it and just feel like that much more of a failure? And he goes, yep. Okay, so what are you supposed to do if your kids have atypical response? I figure there's probably 2 groups of people who read those books, and it's probably more than 50% have kids with an atypical response, because if you have typical kids and you're already doing everything right, you're not going to read the book, right? Like, it's working for you. If you had a poor role model and you're not sure what to do, and then you can get the book and the book can help you, that's great. The book is written for you. Buy the book, benefit from the book, that's wonderful. But then there's the other 50% of the population who are miserably failing, and it doesn't matter what kind of role model they had, because their kids are having an atypical response. So what do we do? I think the biggest thing we have to do is just stay curious. And I really appreciated what you guys were sharing up here about depending on God. And with children who have an atypical response and knowing that the books don't work, and I didn't know this until they were like almost teenagers, but I did know that I had to just start figuring this out by myself because everything that I had read was not working. And who can you go to give you the strength you need to be able to figure out how to parent your kids? Well, God. And so there's the huge dependence that you just get put into dependence. I've got to figure out how to do this, and I have to do it with God's help. So the first thing is just to stay curious. When I tried to put my son in preschool because I thought, well, maybe preschool could teach him some of the things that I'm not able to teach him. So we put him in preschool, and at first he really liked it. And then for some reason he decided he just didn't want to go to preschool anymore. And he says, I don't want to go to preschool. And we're like, well, no, we're going to preschool. And when he got to the door of the preschool, he full on did this thing in the door frame, where he just pushed as hard as he possibly could, and we could not get him through the door. It was a scene. It was a total scene. And I just was like, okay, well, we made an appointment. We took him home. We made an appointment with his teacher. We went in, we met with her, and we said, well, he's saying it's too loud. He's saying it's too loud. And she says, well, what do you mean it's too loud? And he said, well, recess is too loud. And she's like, what are you talking about? You're just as loud as everybody else out there. It's not too loud. I don't know what you're talking about. And so we thought, well, I'm not going to pay money for my kid to go to a school he doesn't want to go to with a teacher who's completely unsympathetic about the fact that he doesn't want to be there. So we took him out. But Glen Auto Park up in Troutdale had this indoor playland, and they still have this. I grabbed this picture off their current website. So they still have this. If you want to have an indoor park, place to take your kids when it's cold and rainy, you can go there. So I thought, okay, well, we'll go to the indoor park. We had another friend who knew about this, so I thought, well, we'll know some people. He'll get to interact with kids. He can get socialized. I'll do the best I can to try to help this kid get where he needs to be. And there were these tricycles, and the kids were riding these tricycles around the outside of this community space. And he just announced this, I want to ride the tricycle. And I said, oh, well, you can. You need to wait your turn. Wait till one of the other kids is done, and then you can go ride the tricycle. And he kind of walks up to the edge of the area, and he's watching the tricycle kind of longingly. And I'm thinking, well, he's trying to figure out how to navigate. How does he say he wants a turn? And then as the tricycle comes around, he just makes this sudden movement to intercept the tricycle. He runs alongside, grabs the tricycle handlebars, tips it sideways, dumps the kid off of it, tips it back, puts himself on, and takes off. I was absolutely mortified. The kid who was dumped off was not hurt, and it was someone that I knew, so I could apologize later, but I chase my kid down, and I stop him, and I say, Andrew, you cannot just dump other kids off of the bike. He says, I know. That's what they said at preschool. They would blow the whistle. It was so loud. If we don't take the time to figure out what our kids are trying to tell us, we will be clueless. My daughter, my favorite story about my daughter, as far as endearing my understanding of where she was a day when she just said all day long, she kept saying, love me, Mama. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? Do you want me to hug you? So I'd hug her. And then later she'd say, love me, Mama. Like, well, what do you want me to tickle you? So she just kept saying this all day long, love me, Mama, love me, Mama. And I kept responding always with a question and then some sort of an action to try to connect with whatever it was she was wanting from me, because I didn't know what she was wanting from me. That day was also incredibly trying. She has never gotten in trouble more times in one day than that day. And she did everything she possibly could that was naughty. And I responded every single time consistently. She spent so much time in timeout. So that day was just this roller coaster of love me, Mama, and I'm going to do the worst thing I can possibly think of. Love me, Mama, and I'm going to do the worst thing I can possibly think of. And at the end of the day, when I put her in bed, she said, love me, Mama. And I said, what? You've been saying that all day. What do you mean by that? And I said, do you want me to tickle you? So I tickled her, and she laughed. And then she said, now I know you love me because you're stronger than me. And I was like, are my kids just weird? Or is this actually something that every kid is thinking, and my kid just verbalized it? I'm going to push, and I'm going to push, and I'm going to push. And I want to know if you still love me, even though I've done nothing to deserve it all day long. And if I had communicated to her that her love, my love for her, was based on her performance, then that day would have been the first time she had done anything wrong. I would have been like, I don't like the way you're behaving today, and you don't get any more of my attention until you figure it out. But what she was able to experience is, I think, the kind of roller coaster that God takes us on. We fail, but he loves us, and we fail, but he loves us, and we fail, but he loves us. And we need to be able to communicate that to our kids as well. My daughter needed correction and training. She needed consistency, but she also needed to know that I loved her. So Greg's definition about someone who loves you is someone who uses their time and resources to pursue what's best for you doesn't mean that you let your kids do whatever they want. It doesn't mean that they get away with whatever they want or they get whatever they want. It means that you're intentionally doing what's best for them. But it's two sides. One is that consequence and that consistency, and the other is that just unconditional love because you're my child, not because you've done something to earn it. So there's a handout on your table that I want to talk about for just a minute here. If you can, you guys want to, you can kind of distribute those if you want to, so you can see it. This is just something that I put together to try to kind of express what I'm thinking. So I'm a bit of a visual person, and I know not all of us do well with words. Sometimes pictures are more helpful. This first circle, kind of at the top left, that's in gray, that mom-child circle, this is kind of your typical, this is what the world thinks. This idea that you can have a child, and that child will love you, and you will love that child, and you'll be the best of friends, and this will just be a wonderful experience. And this is a fairy tale. Because I don't believe this is the way that God has designed parenting to exist. But we do have this idea that if we just love our kids enough, our kids will love us, and eventually we'll have this wonderful circle of love. This is the Christianized version of it. It's the same thing. But it's this idea, well, my source is God's love. So because God loves me, now I can love my child, and my child will love me, and I will love my child, and we'll still be the best of friends. And you see that red arrow? The problem there is that you're expecting the child to be the source of love for the mom. That somehow you're going to get something from your kids. And I really don't believe that parenting is designed that way. And when I think about my relationship with God, it is a beautiful love relationship. I love God and he loves me, but there's not a whole lot he gets from me. He gets my love, but I'm not his source. He's the source. So then there's this one. So this is what I'm trying to kind of explain. My source as a mom is God's love. And then I also love God. I love God and God loves me. That's a closed circle. I love him, he loves me, that's my source. Because I love God, I can then also love my child. Love the Lord your God, love people as you love yourself, right? So now that I can love my child, but then look at what happens to the child. The child's love is then directed back to God's love as their source. So the child is experiencing the love of God in their identity and their understanding, which enables them to learn how to love others. And when they learn how to love others, the others will include the mom. It's not that my children will never love me. It's that they're not my source. They're not the thing that's feeding me and giving me what I need to be able to keep going. If we teach our kids that people are their source, then they're going to learn to people please. And I can love other people because I have people who love me. And then we start doing this little circle that doesn't have anything to do with God's love as a source. It's just, if people like me, then I can like other people, and then they can learn to like other people. And this is a very humanized version of what we do as humans. But God has got to be the source. And I put Greg's quote up there just to kind of put it alongside here to this idea that the person who loves you is going to pursue what's best for you using their time and their resources. And that's what God is going to do. And he's going to be that source and give us what we need to be able to move on. When my son was here at Good Shepherd, when he was in preschool, I went and picked him up, and he had this little piece of paper that said, "Ways I worship God," right? And so I'm trying to interact with him. So I said, "Oh, tell me about your paper." And he's like, and I said, "Well, it says ways I worship God." "Oh, look, there's all these different ways," and he's colored them and, done a little craft thing with it. And I said, "Well, which one do you like the best?" Trying to engage him. And he goes, "None of them. I don't worship God. I worship Satan." Okay, this is not what I expect from sending my kids to Sunday school. So I said, well, what do you mean? And he goes, well, these are ways you worship God, and I am not doing these. So if I don't worship God, I guess I worship Satan. And I said, well, honey, this one right here says go to church, and that's where we are right now, But he had, even though I had tried so hard to tell him that my love for him was unconditional and God loved him unconditionally, he had internalized this idea of performance-based love, that actions are a measure of love rather than love being a motivation for actions. And that's a really subtle difference, but it's huge. If we're recognizing that love is the source, then the actions flow out of the love. If we think that the love has to be earned, then the actions precede the love, and it's a measure. So it's a very, very fine line. And my kids continue to encounter it throughout their experience. Even overseas in the missions community, it was really pervasive in the missions community. And I could tell you more about that another time if you want to know. But this is something that is just in our culture. You need to perform to be loved. And they're going to get that from everywhere else, and we have to fight it. We absolutely have to fight it. I love this passage of the words of Jesus from the Message translation. Most Bible translations are done with a team of scholars. So if you got ESV, NIV, those sorts of things, it's a team of scholars. And then a paraphrase is like one scholar who's kind of giving you their take. And this particular translator, his goal was to just make the words more accessible in modern English. So it's not like the best study Bible, but sometimes it's a really great place to go to just get a perspective of what we're looking at. So in this example, my paraphrase got bumped off when I sent my slide. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. And this is how God parents us. We are not adolescents of God. We are not adults of God. We are children of God. And he continues to parent us. And this is how he does it. And it's training us, it's encouraging us, it's listening to us, it's sharing in our joys. It's his grace at work in us. And the verse that was up earlier about my grace is sufficient for you, it's that idea that God gives us what we need and he meets us in that moment and takes us forward to where we need to be. He's not judging us, he's guiding us, and he's loving us. If your goal is to control your children, you'll end up following the culture, and you'll end up using guilt and shame to manipulate good behavior in your kids. And the power differential in the preschool years is so great that a lot of you could be really successful at it, especially if you don't have atypical children. But unfortunately, that doesn't last, because it's not built on relationship. And we as humans are designed to function in relationship. That God made us for relationship with him and with others. And so when we use guilt and shame to manipulate and control behavior, we can get kids who look really good, and maybe we can feel like parents who are doing really well, but it doesn't last. And having walked long enough to see people raise their kids, I've seen people whose kids were really perfect in the preschool years, and they just completely derailed when they got older. So my parenting really shifted when I realized that I wasn't training my kids to move from dependence on me to independence, but I was training them to move from dependence on me to dependence on God. That they just need to take another parent. Eventually, they will become my peers. And they kind of are right now at 23 and 24. My relationship with them is completely different. because they've adulted. They've grown into the same place that I am, and now we both experience God at like a level of siblingship, right? We're both children of God, but we know that God is the parent. And you've got to keep that focus of always having God as your parent and help your kids understand that that's where they're moving. And eventually they're going to be able to take their cares to the Lord, knowing what it looks like to go to a parent who loves you unconditionally because you are their child and not because you're performing a certain way. We need to know that we have someone who's stronger than us and someone who loves us and who's doing what's best for us. And sometimes we don't understand that. I mean, when you think of Psalm 23, the shepherd is making his entire world revolve around the sheep. Like, he's so intentional about the sheep, and he's guiding the sheep, and he's protecting the sheep, but doesn't mean that the sheep are always comfortable. And he takes them through the valley of the shadow of death. You go through difficult things. God takes us through difficult things, and he has a purpose and a plan in it, but he's entirely for us. And our worth is entirely based on being his child, not on anything that we do or anything that we can earn. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we come back up here, but I'm going to turn it back over to team.
Well, thank you, Kathy. That's amazing. I'm so glad she's going to come back. My only regret so far is not being able to hear a message like this sooner in my parenting journey. So thank you so much for what you prepared for us. Okay, we're just going to take a little break here. From what I've heard, there's still lots of things out there on the tables for you to see if you need them for your kiddos. And then I guess there's also some women's clothes out there. So feel free to take a look during the break, and then we'll do our raffle when you guys come back. Thanks.
All right, so you have a theme this year of at the table, which I thought is such a great theme in terms of parenting, because I think putting food in front of our children is something we naturally do as parents. And, sometimes you wonder, like, at what point do your kids start feeding you? So, I don't know. We just did Christmas, and my husband's 97-year-old grandmother still hosted and made all the food for Christmas. I'm not saying that's how it should be. I'm just saying that I think there's a natural desire to sacrifice for our kids and to give of ourselves to them. So as I mentioned before, people tell you to slow down and enjoy it, but you can't because it's hard and it's exhausting, but it's God's design. And we're creating a bond that is foundational, and the greatest gift we can give our kids is our time. I think your greatest present to your children is your presence. So I want to talk a little bit about how we can do that, how we can be present with our kids. If your kid is in preschool or daycare and they are not with you all the time, I would also really encourage you to just recenter them when they come back. When my son first went out into the world, he into a classroom environment, he came back just talking a million miles a minute, and I had to get down at his eye level and say, I'm here, and you're the only kid I'm listening to. Because he had just internalized the chaos of the classroom and recognized that sometimes you just have to grab, for attention and try to stay connected. And I was like, no, you're home. Home is a place where you're listened to. So it's okay, you can slow down. Home is different. Home is safe. So John Gottman is a marriage research expert. Some of you may know who he is or have read some of his books. He has done a ton of research in what makes marriages succeed and fail. And one of the research things that he did was over this idea of what he calls bids. So a bid is basically like an ask for attention. So maybe you go to the window and you say, oh, look at that squirrel. And the people in the room then can choose whether or not they respond to that bid. So maybe they say, oh, what, there's a squirrel out there? Or maybe they come and look. That would be a positive response to the bid. Or maybe they just ignore you, like they didn't hear you at all. That's a negative response, or a negative response could actually be something that's against you. Like, I know there's squirrels out there all the time. Why are you interrupting me? Can't you see I'm busy? Or what is your problem? Why are you making such a big deal about the stupid squirrel? Okay, so that would be a very negative response to the bid. So basically, it's a bid for attention, and then whether or not it receives a positive response or a negative response. And what he found over a 6-year study of marriages, he studied marriages for 6 years in terms of bids, and then he watched those marriages to see whether they succeeded or failed. And he found that the marriages that failed had a 33% positive response to bids, and marriages that succeeded had an 86% positive response to bids, yeah. So the difference between responding only like a third of the time and then responding like 86% of the time. He's not saying this is why marriages succeed and fail. He's just saying it's a curious observation that when there is a relational component where people are responding to each other's bids, those relationships do better. They succeed, they survive. And in the preschool years, your kids make lots and lots of bids, lots of times. I mean, and if you're not paying attention, they'll up the ante. Mom, look, Mom, look, Mom, look. They want to have that interaction. They want to get that bid. And they want to have you respond to them in a positive way. And if this is true of marriage with adults, it's so true also in our relationship with our kids. So when they make those bids, we need to be able to respond to those bids because the world is not going to respond to their bids. They're going to go out into the world and they're going to try to figure out how to navigate bids in the world. How do I ask for attention and get some sort of reciprocal response? I'm looking for reciprocity. This works, this doesn't work, this works, this doesn't work. But when I'm out there in the world navigating bids and I'm exhausted, then I can come home and I know here, my bids are safe here. When I give a bid here, my mom's going to respond to me. So we had a few rules in our house, and one of them was that we didn't talk between rooms. I had grown up in a family that talked between rooms a lot, and it really broke down communication. So one of the things my husband and I decided is we will not talk between rooms. This was really beautiful when our kids moved into adolescence, because when you make a bid from a different room for someone's attention, you're demanding attention from someone that you haven't even taken the time to notice. Like you haven't even come into their physical space to see what's going on. So when they moved into adolescence, it forced me to go and see their context before I was asking for something from them. And it kept them from yelling at me from the other room. Because as soon as they were like, rah, 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 I'm like, we don't talk between rooms. And they're like, oh my God, I gotta go. So it was really, really great. The other thing we taught them was to make eye contact. So when you make a bid, you wait for eye contact from that person you made a bid before you continue talking, so that you don't have a kid who's just and nobody's paying attention to what that kid is saying. So teaching them to be relational and to understand when someone's listening and to understand how to communicate that they're listening. So sometimes you can't always give your kids the attention that they need, but you can always value giving them the attention that they need. So if my son comes up to me and I'm in something, maybe it's your Bible study, maybe it's just a text that you're writing, to be able to say, I really want to give you my full attention, so I need to finish writing this text, and then I'm going to be able to focus on what you're saying. And then you finish what you're doing, you put the phone down, and you turn your attention to your kid. So the kid understands, sometimes I have to wait to really be heard, but when I am being heard, I am really being heard. When we try to multitask and finish the text while we're also listening to our kid, that must have been hard. Your brain is here, and your kid is going to feel it. And he's not old enough to understand what he's feeling. He's just going to feel this separation. So it's so much better to just say, I see that you're very excited. Give mommy just a second. I'm in the middle of a thought. Let me finish this. And then you can shift and give him the attention that he needs. The other thing we said was no phones at the dinner table. And I think the biggest thing is to consider that you are modeling now what you want to see in your kids later. So your kids are watching you right now to see what it means to be an adult. So if you don't want teenagers distracted by devices, you can't be distracted by devices right now because they're watching you. They're like, this is what it means to be an adult. This is where I'm going. This is what I'm going to become. And you don't get to change the rules when they get older. You know, you don't get to be like, okay, now that we've got teenagers in the house, we're going to have new rules about cell phones. It's like, oh, no. No. When my daughter was ready to drive, she informed me, Mom, I've been learning to drive since kindergarten. And she was really particular. She always wanted to sit behind the passenger seat. She would not trade sides of the car with her brother because she wanted to watch everything that I was doing. And luckily, I didn't speed a lot, so now she's actually quite a safe driver. But if I had, she would not have been a safe driver. They're watching you to see what it means to be an adult. So I remember one time I was having a great time with my kids and my phone rang. And so I picked up my phone because I was taught when the phone rings, you answer it because it might be an emergency and you just don't know and you better check it. Well, it wasn't an emergency. It was just someone calling and asking, for some of my time. And as a stay-at-home mom who really likes people, I love to have time talking to adults. It's difficult to be all day long with littles. And so there I was having this great conversation with my friend, and my kids start acting up. And the phone conversation ended as it always does, at least for me. I don't know about the rest of you, but, well, you know what happens when the moms are on the phone. The kids act up because, I don't know, they think they can get away with it or whatever. But my kids were just getting loud and unruly and just kind of falling apart in front of me. So I hung up the phone, and then I went to my kids, and it kind of dawned on me, we had been having a really great time, and then the phone had interrupted us. So I took the phone to my kids, and I said, we were having a really good time, and then the phone interrupted us, and they said, yeah. And I said, and I wasn't able to give my attention to you because I was giving my attention to my phone. And they said, yeah. And I said, did that upset you? And they said, yeah. And I said, I think we should put the phone in timeout for being so rude. And I think they were incredibly relieved because they're pretty sure they were going to get put in timeout for being so loud. If my goal was to talk on the phone, my kids were being rude. But if my goal was to be with my children, the phone was being rude. And so I made a decision at that point that I was going to treat my phone the same way I would treat any other unwelcomed guest in my house. If that same friend had barged through my door into my house and said, so excuse me, could we just talk about my problems right now for a while? I would have went, are you kidding? Like, you didn't even ask me if this was a good time. Why are you in my front room? But when I picked up that phone, that's exactly what happened. Somebody who was interrupting my world was treated like a welcomed guest. And I'm not saying you never talk to anybody on the phone, but I am saying that when the phone rings, it's nice to be able to make an assessment of what's actually going on in front of you at the moment. And if your kids are engaged in something or they're doing something separate from you, or if you can let your kids know, hey, mommy would really like to talk to her friend for a while. I want you guys to, do this activity or whatever. I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to talk for this long. And then you can go have that conversation. And your kids understand that that's a welcomed guest, not someone who just intruded into the situation. So phones, I think, they're a rude connection to the rest of the world. And sometimes you just have to take the rude people out of the room so that you can accomplish the thing that you're trying to do. My daughter, I don't even know what she was frustrated about, but there was one point in time where she was just really frustrated. And I was frustrated with her, and her behavior was poor, and I just blurted out to her, the world does not revolve around you, right? Because I just was like, Ma. And she puts her hands on her 4-year-old hips and goes, well, then who does it revolve around? I was like, And truth be known, like I wanted it to revolve around me. Like I was tired, I was exhausted. I didn't want to continue doing, giving. And I needed it to revolve around me. I needed someone to care about me. I needed to be filled up. I needed to be able to move forward in what we were talking about before, to have that feeling, that grace, that ability to move forward. So I want to talk a little bit about how we do that. That verse from Galatians 5:25 says, since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. God wants to walk with us through the difficult things that we go through, and parenting is certainly one of them. And he's given us the Holy Spirit to walk with us. Like the third member of the Trinity, God himself is going to walk with you and go through life with you. But how do we get to a place where we can recognize that? So this is a book. I've been telling you the books don't work. However, I have one to recommend. This is a book that was actually recommended by Alan Halofka when my kids were little. It wasn't in a mom-to-mom group, but it was a group of young moms. And it's called Families Where Grace is in Place. This is a theoretical book about our relationship with God. And if you like what I've been talking about this morning, this is your go-to. This is your next step, because this gives you lots of great illustrations. He also does a really good job of giving illustrations about phases of your kid's life, like when your kid learns how to say no and how you need to respect that, and your kid needs to be able to say no. I had a friend who had a very compliant child, and she would do transitions with questions. And one day, she goes, are you ready to go to bed? And her child had just gotten to the no phase, and her child goes, no. And she thought, oh, note to self, I guess I can't ask questions anymore to get my kid to go to bed. So she said, oh, you're not ready to go to bed? Okay, well, I will come back in 5 minutes, and then it will be bedtime, and we will go to bed. So she's like, I can't ask a question here. I need to actually say this is what has to happen. But your child needs to learn how to say no, because when they become a teenager, they need to know how to say no. And they need to know what no means. They need to know that no is a word that causes things to shift and causes people to change, and that they have agency and they have power in their words. If she had just dismissed that, if her daughter had said, no, I don't want to go to bed, and she has said, no, you do want to go to bed. Okay, well, now she's controlling her daughter, telling her daughter what to think, taking away her agency, taking away her understanding of what it means to say no. Those are huge developmental steps your kids need to be able to take, and it's hard to navigate those. This book is an excellent resource for explaining how all those dynamics work, and also explaining specific stages. So I can plug that as much as I can. The next slides I'm going to show you come straight from this book. So this is the context here. Ephesians 5:18 says, don't be drunk with wine because it will ruin your life. Instead, be filled with the Holy Spirit. And those two words, be filled, are the Greek word pleroma. And it means to be permeated, like food coloring in water. Just this idea that there isn't any place it doesn't go. So when we're filled with the Spirit, it's like God is reaching every single part of our life. We don't get to hold little pockets where he doesn't quite get to. He wants to just go everywhere and change everything about who we are. So that word, that Greek word pleroma, is in the present. It's a present passive imperative. So those of you who are word nerds, you already know this, but for the rest of us, I'll break this down and explain what that means. And I'll start with that last one. An imperative is a command. That the one who is commanding assumes that you have the power to carry through in your own power. So it's I'm telling you, you have to do this. This is a thing you have to do. However, it's in the passive voice. So because it's in the passive voice, it's not something you can do, but it's something that must be done to you or for you. So if it were in the active voice, it would be get yourself filled. But in the passive voice, it's allow yourself to be filled. And then it's present tense. So that means whenever it is now. Whenever it's now. So it's not something that happened in the past. You're not filled by the Spirit and then march through life because one and done, you got it. And it's not something that you're waiting to happen in heaven. Someday you'll be filled by the Spirit. It's like, no, it's happening now, and it's ongoing, and it's always happening. So a literal translation of that phrase, be filled, could be, and this is Jeff Van Vonderen's words, allow yourself to be continuously filled with the Spirit. It is not something you should or even can do. It is something you should and can allow to be done to you whenever it is now. And I hope that you see in that childlike position that we have before God. Our responsibility is to yield ourselves, to put ourselves in a place where God can speak and God can fill us and God can make us into the people that he wants us to be. Romans 12, I'm going to come back to that. Romans 12:2 says, don't be conformed to this pattern of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. It's that same kind of idea. So being filled with the Spirit is something that keeps happening. And here's a little video example how come my video didn't play? Can you make that video play? All right, well, I apologize because it's a really great video. I will explain to you what it looks like and we'll see if she can get it to play. It's a video of a glass of water and a blue food dropper is being put into the water. And the water becomes blue because the food dropper's in there. It's permeating it. It's filling it. But then there's a stream of water that comes into that cup, and that stream that comes into that cup is like time. And when you're putting a fresh stream of clear water into the blue cup, that water is going to kind of dissipate. The blue kind of disappears. And then that dropper's got to come and put more food coloring in for it to stay blue. Because if that water just keeps changing, because there's all this stream of water that's time, and it's just changing and changing and changing, you've got to continue to be filled. And that's the way that we are with the Spirit. We've got to continue to be filled. If we are just filled once and we're like, yeah, God's with me and I'm ready to go, and we get out into life and life is just continuing on and we're not continuing to come back to a place where we can be filled, we just start going back to looking like what we did before. And sometimes we can end up in a place where we're just feeling so like, where's God? Why is my life not any different? Why am I not being transformed? We're going to give up on that video. Romans 12:2 says, don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Both the words conformed and transformed are also passive present imperatives. Both of them are also that. They're not something that we do. They're something that's done to us. So if we are not actively being filled by the Spirit, we're being conformed to the pattern of this world. And it's just going to squeeze us and shape us. And we're going to start believing all of the things that the world is trying to tell us. If we are putting ourselves in a place where we can be yielded to the Spirit, we're going to be being transformed. But again, those are both passive commands that are happening within the context of where we've placed ourselves. It's a yieldedness. So, I'm not going to go there yet. So, how do you put yourself in situations where you can be filled? How do you get yourself to a place where you can be filled, especially when you have small children and life is like totally chaotic? I will tell you, first and foremost, I think the best place you can be is church. I don't go to church because it's an obligation. I don't go to church because I want people to think well of me because I always show up at church. I go to church because it's a place that is intentionally designed for me to yield myself to God and be filled with the Spirit. I mean, every single component of our church service is designed to be a place of yielding. You're going to get teaching, you're going to have music, you're going to have worship. Even, and this is just a very modern thing, but even the dimming of the lights when we do worship in the service over here, it focuses me. It just pulls me forward. And, some people think it's show. I don't think it's show. I think it's just intentional. Like, focus us. Get us to a place where we can have a chance to respond to what God's doing in us. But it may also be something else that you didn't even necessarily expect. When my kids were little, my husband's grandmother gave us a little chunk of money, and we weren't really sure what we wanted to do with it. And we ended up deciding that we were going to use it for a gym membership. which was one of the best things I ever did because my kids are incredibly social and they absolutely loved the little play area that they could go to. And we could be there, they could be in that play area for 2 hours a day. So when I would get to my wit's end and I was just overwhelmed and I did not have the patience to handle life anymore, I'd be like, let's go to the gym. And they were always excited to go to the gym. They wanted to go to the gym. That was the best thing. So we check them into the playland. They're happy. They're having a great time. And I would walk and jog on the treadmill, and then I'd hit each of those little weightlifting machines and do 3 sets of 8 of who knows how much. I had no idea what I was doing. I was not there to get in shape. I was literally there to just find my sanity and be able to spend some time with the Lord. Because I was moving my body, and then I was able to just let my brain process and think and pray and just use that time to reset myself and pray, Lord, help me to get back where I need to be, reset me where I need to be, remind me of the truths of who you are. We didn't have any family in the area, so I didn't have grandma's house. I couldn't take my kids and just let grandma take them for a while. So the gym became that place for me where I could just say, I need time, and I need to be able to focus. And when I was done with the little weight machines, I'd go stretch for a while. And one time, I have a bad hip, so I do this stretch where I lay on the ground, like on my hip, and try to stretch my hip. And I remember one time waking up and looking at the clock. And I, no kidding, was 20 minutes in that stretch. I fell asleep on the floor in that stretch, and I was there for 20 minutes. And I thought, probably the people around me are like, wow, she's really committed. Like, she's really going to stretch that hip. Anyway, it was a place that gave me rest. It was a place that gave me distance and perspective. And it was just something that was really beautiful for me because I intentionally said, Lord, I want to spend this time with you. If my goal had been to get in shape and I was spending all this time learning all these things, and that would have been different. But this focus was intentionally to be like, I need to get filled. I need to get refreshed. I need to be able to go back and do the things I need to do. So moving your body, running, walking, biking, all those things can be good. Taking time to pray, finding time to journal can be hugely beneficial for people. I really love just going for a drive. A drive can be really great. Actually found my kids drove really well because we were so intentional of making sure they were being listened to, that when we get in the car, we'd talk for a while, and then they'd kind of just settle into their own thing, and they'd do their own thing. And so we could listen to music. Music is a great way to fill your mind and your life with the truth of who God is and just be immersed in that. Being artistic, if you like to cross stitch or paint or draw, it can be beautiful moments to just interact with God. The session that they're doing right now, talking about the disciplines, habits of grace, those things that are ways that we can put ourselves in a place where we can be filled. But they're not boxes to check to somehow earn God's love or God's favor. They're literally just places for us to rest in the truth of who God is and yield ourselves to him. And maybe you can't do some of these things with your kids in tow. If you have a spouse who can help you guard time, let them. Let them guard some time for you. Let them take the kids and give you permission to have some time and do it for them as well so that they have some time that's guarded where they can really just spend some time with the Lord. Sometimes it's hard to find that, and if our spouses can help us do that, it's really, really beneficial. I always felt guilty if I wasn't with my kids. I felt like I had to be with my kids 24/7, and if I wasn't with my kids, well, then I better be making some money because, there's things that we need to, do, and my job is a stay-at-home mom, and if I'm not staying home with my kids, then I better be making money. I think that's a lie. When the Spirit is active in you, the fruit of the Spirit is love and joy and peace and patience and goodness and kindness and gentleness and faithfulness and self-control. And I cannot think of a better list of what you need to parent well than that. I mean, if your kid could say, my mom was patient, my mom was kind, my mom loved me, right? My mom had self-control. My mom, my mom was good. My mom was faithful. That's laying a foundation. But that is the fruit of the Spirit. That's not something we muster up in ourselves. That's something that is the direct result of placing ourselves in a place where God can fill us and then walking in the strength that he gives us. So here's my final thought. 50% of us are atypical, but God loves all of us. And he loves us not based on what we do. He loves us based on who we are. And if you don't know that, if you don't know that there's nothing you can do that would make God love you less, and there's nothing you could do that would make God love you more, then my suggestion is you find out a little bit more about who God is. Because when we feel really exhausted and at the end of ourselves, and maybe that God is against us or that he's demanding performance, I think the best thing we can do is get a better picture of who God is, because that's not who he is. And that's something that we've been sold and that the world has brought to us. But God doesn't operate in performance-based love. He operates in identity-based love. And we're his children. And as Greg said in his sermon from Deuteronomy, a verse in Deuteronomy 7, God loves us because he loves us. All right.
Okay, that was incredible. I know there's so many things we all took notes on over there. We're going to turn it over to the table leaders and mentor moms. Make sure to open your time up in prayer. We have some really great questions, so make sure everyone gets a chance to share, and we'll bring it back in about 30 minutes. Enjoy.